Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us, virtual audience, and thank you for our brave audience who came out on another hot night to talk to our friend T. Jefferson Parker. Lord, how long have we been together?
Gosh, I don't know.
It's at least 25 years.
Yeah, easy, because I moved from
No,
Laguna
you have to use the mic or it won't pick up.
I moved from Laguna Beach, is it on? You hear me? To San Diego area where I live now in 2020. So that was 24 years ago, and I'd been coming
No,
up
not
to
20,
see you
2020.
earlier than that.
Oh, yeah. No, it was the book with the snake.
Yeah, Where Serpents Lie. That
Right.
was mid-90s.
Right. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it really has been almost forever. And luckily, we get to do your book lunches a lot of the time because he's so close, being in
Yeah,
San
it's cool.
Diego. I know. So, one of the things that I've always loved about you is not only are you a great writer, but you really showcase your home state. You love going around California. In fact, you've won 3 Edgars, if I remember this right. And
Yeah.
all 3 of them were set in various
Yeah.
aspects of California.
Yeah, every book I've written has been centered in California. This is my just so you know, this is my 29th book. I'm working on number 30 right now, and they're all set in California. They're set in pretty much modern contemporary times. I have some historical chapters in some of them, whatever, and I go back. I wrote a 1968 book set in Laguna Beach, 1,000 Steps, which. So when I first wrote it, I thought, well, this is kind of cool. And somebody said, oh, you've written a historical. And I thought, wow, I am getting old.
I wish you wouldn't say that. It's so depressing. I can tell you that when
It's
I
so
started the
depressing.
store in 1989, the historical bar was basically just before the 1920s. So anything before the 20s was considered historical. And books set in the 1920s didn't work at all. And a great example of that are the Miss Fisher mysteries, which became absolutely huge. Carrie Greenwood's books. There were 2 of them published here in the
Oh,
in the 90s, and they just didn't do well at all because nobody quite knew what to do with the 1920s. And then depressingly, when Laurie King wrote Back to the Garden, either last year or the year before, set in the early 1970s, I realized that, in fact, the 50-year bar
they moved the bar.
had progressed.
Yeah.
And now I'm actually seeing books set in the 1980s being talked about as historical fiction.
Oh, geez.
I know.
That's
mean,
not fair.
Well, anyway, we're both seniors, kiddo.
That
I'm
makes
more
my first
senior
novel
for you.
historical, 'cause
It does.
Laguna Heat
It
was
really does.
1985.
So, of all the books Jeff has written, my heart still belongs to Silent Joe, which won the Edgar. And then he wrote California Girl some years later, excuse me, which won another Edgar. And your other one's for a short story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is called what?
It was called, it was called Easy Street. Yeah. Way back in the 90s. Yeah, short story.
Right.
Yeah.
So, anyway, we are in Laguna Beach and surf's up in this book. So,
Surf's up.
and there's apparently a hot surfing area called the Mavericks. So I know in Hawaii there are names given to different places because I don't surf, but I've been to some of them. So how long have the Mavericks been the Mavericks?
I'll tell you. Surfing surfing changed dramatically in the early 1990s.
Was
I've
that
been
the Hawaiian guy, Duke Kamehameha, whatever his
no,
name
he
was?
was 100 years earlier. Yeah.
He was?
Yeah.
100 years earlier?
Duke, yeah, well,
I didn't
a
know
lot.
that.
I mean, yeah, 75 maybe. Yeah. Anyway, in 1990, not in the 1990s, surfers discovered gigantic waves, and that had never been surfed before, and there were certain places, and one of the places was a break off the coast of Half Moon Bay in Northern California, which is just like 30 miles south of San Francisco. It's real close. It's up in those frigid Northern California waters. And the name of the break is Mavericks. And a guy named Jeff Clark started surfing Mavericks when he was a kid. And nobody would go out with him because the waves were so big and so scary, and the water was so cold, and the rocks were so shallow. And Jeff did as best as he could to ride those giant waves, but he and other people surfing similar breaks around the world discovered that you just can't you can't catch these waves with a surfboard on a regular old surfboard because the waves are too fast and too big, and you can't. And so they said, well, how are we going to do this? And there was born tow-in surfing. And tow-in surfing started with a few guys riding a few gigantic breaks in the world, being towed into the wave on a jet ski powered by their partner, driven by their partner. So the wave would come up like this giant 30, 40, 50-foot thing. And the surfers here and the ski is here, and the ski will just take the surfer up the face of the wave, up the face, up the face, up the face, and then the skier will go over the top, do a big aerial, and come down on the safe side of the wave, and the surfer will drop the tow rope and turn and try to make the drop into that thing. And he's already going 35, 40 miles an hour, and then making the drop. And so either that or they would be dropped into the wave by a helicopter. That was more dangerous, though. The jet ski was the way to go, and all of a sudden, men and women were riding these waves that were heretofore unrideable, and they're still doing it. If you want a visceral thrill, go on Google or YouTube or whatever, and Google Mavericks for starters. This is where the book takes place. The big contest takes place in the book there. Or go do Nazaré, Portugal, big waves. Go big waves, tow-in surfing, and your jaw will drop when you see the size of these waves that are being ridden by people now. And it's really something. And that obviously inspired me. And so what I liked about Mavericks was, again, it's in California. It's my beat. Not only are the waves enormous, and occasionally, very occasionally, perfect and rideable. The water is bitingly cold. It's in the 50s, the low 50s, and guys and women wearing 5mm neoprene wetsuits are cold at Mavericks because it's so bitterly cold. And the rocks of the reef are really shallow. You can get tangled up with them really easy when you're held under by a big wave. People have drowned doing that. And to boot, they're great white sharks. So I know. So that's Mavericks. And if you don't get inspired by that as a writer, I don't know how you can get inspired by anything. My brother was a surfer. I surfed a little, not much, but enough to understand how powerful that water is. And I wanted to write a book about fear, about overcoming fear of the known. And fear of the known in this case is a young, well, she's not even young anymore. She's a 46-year-old mom, mother of twins. She's 46, her sons are 24. And 25 years ago, Jennifer's her name, Jen surfed one of the early big wave contests at Mavericks with her husband. And her husband died in that contest. He was favored to win it. He was a great surfer, great California surfer, and they thought that he could win it, and he died. His surf leash got caught up in the shallow rocks, and he couldn't get out of it, and he drowned. And Jen, the widow, she always felt responsible because she is the one that had towed him into that wave on the jet ski, and her sons were yet to be born. She was pregnant then and didn't know it, and so this is a book about Jen confronting her fear of the known, which is those waves. She doesn't surf the waves for 20 years. She stays in shape and she surfs small waves, but she hasn't surfed Mavericks in 25 years. And she convinces herself that she needs to ride waves in that contest in order to atone for what she thinks that she's responsible for in the death of her husband because she towed him in. And she needs to confront her own fear of the waves and the cold water and everything. So she knows her nightmares in up one side and down the other, and this book is about her trying to getting ready and going to that contest. And the tonic, chapter of the whole book is that contest. And you'll like what happens. Both of her sons are very accomplished. The twins are very accomplished surfers too. So it's a family affair out there in 40, 50 foot surf. The swell that they catch at Mavericks is a once in a lifetime swell. It's just enormous. And they actually ask the surfers if they want to not do it because it's so big. And they all say no. No, we're going out because that's what surfers do.
Well, several things I could say. For one thing, only a person in California would think 50-degree water is actually cold. I grew up in Lake Michigan when it was 50 degrees. We were out there you know, without wetsuits or whatever it
Ooh.
is, swimming away. I mean, I can easily remember
That's
summers
cold.
at the beach when it was below 50.
Well, you guys
Um,
had ice fishing, yeah.
well, we did. And that brings me to another thing that has nothing to do with your book. But the New York Times a while back pointed out that there is a surf shop I'm trying to remember if it's in Duluth, but anyway, right on the western edge of Lake Superior, a thriving surf shop industry from people from California because people are surfing Lake Superior
Are they?
in the
I
winter.
didn't know that. Wow.
In the winter, and they are wearing far more serious
Oh, yeah.
wetsuits. I don't know that the waves are in any way comparable, but the
Yeah.
conditions,
Wow.
are horrible.
Wow.
I
Lake
could
Superior
yep.
surf.
Well, but it's a refugee from California.
Yes, they leave the
decided to open a
Californians.
surf shop in
No problem.
northern Minnesota,
That's cool.
which I absolutely love. So one of the things that
exciting.
I've always found interesting about Jeff is that his books are so different. A lot of the wisdom in publishing is you should, everything should be the same but different, and you don't you don't do that. And one of the things you do that's different, aside from moving the locations and interesting new characters, is the pacing of your books can be radically different. So when you were writing those really hard-hitting books about, the bad guys in California, then those were pretty high-action thrillers. And some books like this one, while there's a lot going on with the surfing, the actual action is much slower because it's more of a character study than, in many ways, than a thriller. So with Jeff, you get something different every book. So if you've read him, you probably know what I'm talking about. Would you agree with that?
Yep, absolutely. And I'm very impressed by the way you acquainted yourself with the Asian community, the Vietnamese community,
Oh, thank you.
and that takes some work, right?
Yeah, yeah, it does. I like being amongst the people that I write about in the cities that I write about and the state. I've been, I've been to everywhere that I've written about almost, and I think in some ways my books are every one of them is kind of a thinly disguised love letter to the city that it's set in. I mean, I love Laguna Beach. I've written about it 10 times, and there's another one, number 11, whatever. But I've written about other places in California too, cities and areas, and I just get so much inspiration from an area and an area's history. And I just love being able to walk. Like when I moved to Fallbrook, for example, it's in San Diego County. I've been there 24 years now. But when I moved there 24 years ago from Laguna Beach, I remember just kind of walking around in town and going to the grocery store and going to the gas station or whatever, and looking around and talking to people and reading the history about it and stuff. And I just thought it was such a great little place. It was one of the reasons I moved there was because it really looked to me exactly like small town Main Street America should look like, and it is. It's really cool. And one day I was there doing my usual. I was at the gas station, and this would have been 2015, say. United States was thick into the war in Afghanistan, and we were losing a lot of troops in this bloody place called Sangin Valley in Afghanistan, Helmand Province, I think it was. And I'm at the gas station getting gas, and here's a young Marine. He's filling up his car too, and he's got the Marine haircut. And we live right, Fallbrook's right next to Camp Pendleton, so you see Marines everywhere. And so I said, "Hey, thank you for your service." He goes, "Okay." And I said, "How's it going? Are you coming or going?" He says, "I'm back. I'm back." I said, "Wow, that's something. Where were you?" He goes, "Sangin Valley," like that. And I go, "Oh, I've heard about that. I've heard about a lot about that. Highest rates of casualties of any division in the Marines in that war. Terrible, terrible scenes." And anyway, long way around is I ended up interviewing him for Full Measure, one of my books, and I wouldn't have gotten to talk to Tristan or even had saying it in my mind in any way than as just a factoid that I read in the newspaper. If I hadn't lived in Fallbrook at that time and had my antenna out and stubbed my toe literally on this, he was 18 years old then. I mean, he's 19. He'd been there for 2 years, and he went over there when he was 17. Anyway, and so he kind of helped form the background of that book, and so Fallbrook gave me that story, and in Little Saigon, you talked about the Vietnamese. Garden Grove gave me that story because I hung around in those nightclubs and stuff when the refugees were coming in.
What about
and
the
it was-
tuna fisheries?
The what?
The tuna guys. I remember when you told me you were going to write a book about the tuna fishermen in San Diego, I think it was.
Yeah, that too. And when I go down to San Diego and walk the docks where the old tuna fleet used to be. My brother was on one of those boats 30, 40 years ago when it was extant. And so anyway, I love California, and I love the cities that I live in. I mean, I love everything, but where I live, I just get inspiration from. And one of the things that I really like being a writer is that I can write about where I am. I think it's wonderful. It's wonderful to go about your life on a daily basis in your city, wherever it might be, and keeping your eye out for the stories. Keeping your eye out for the interesting characters and the stories. And so California all the way. I like our history.
I do. Is it mostly Southern California?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you mentioned Half Moon Bay. I can tell you that when I was an undergraduate at Stanford, the daring thing that we did was we would drive down to San Jose and cross over to Half Moon Bay to have illegal beach parties where we would drink beer. And one of the reasons I remember it so well is that one occasion in May, we decided to roast hot dogs. And we did. And then all of us nearly died because what we roasted hot dogs on were poison oak sticks.
Oh, geez.
And I was so sick that I had to be excused from taking finals and, take them later because you really don't want to, do that.
Burning
but
poison oak.
Yep,
that must be
into
really
the hot
noxious.
dogs, right?
Oh.
But anyway, that was the most daring thing we did. But I don't recall waves. I don't recall, any sort of surfing action in Half Moon Bay. But I mean, that was like 1961. So
well, you
maybe
know
there
why?
wasn't
Is you
any.
can't see Mavericks from land. You can kind of see it when it's huge. You can get up on the cliffs, which I've done, and look down, and you can see it. But it's a quarter mile out, half a mile out. It's real far out. You have to be on a boat to really see those waves. So they were there, but you can't see them from anywhere at Half Moon Bay that I was. I traipsed the beaches up and down, and right where you'd go out to Mavericks, and you can't see them. You can't see the waves.
So are you a surfer yourself?
No, not really. I've been on a surfboard a few times. I rode an e-board for a long time. Body surfed a lot, Newport Beach. But no, I can't claim that I ever was a surfer. I've fallen off a surfboard a few times. That's about as good as it gets.
So
Which sort of helped me write the book. I mean, I can really appreciate how hard it is to ride a surfboard. I mean, it looks easy. I mean, the good guys always make whatever they do look easy, but it's so hard. It's so very hard to do. So I have an immense amount of respect for those guys. And just from riding a kneeboard and body surfing at Newport, I have a healthy respect for how just bone crushingly powerful an 8-foot wave is. I mean, really. Yeah, I body surfed the wedge, scared the daylights out of me. I mean, and that's serious stuff. And those waves are 10 feet maybe. They're not 60 feet like at Mavericks moving 30 miles an hour. So whole different thing.
Proving how little I know, is there a serious undertow effect? Are people pulled out, after is there a danger that you could be pulled out into the, through a current out into the ocean?
I don't know how that plays out at Mavericks. I don't really think so. The being pulled out into the open sea at Mavericks while it's breaking huge would be a blessing. Out of the impact zone and away from those waves, and you may be offshore a lot further than you want to be, but you're not getting pounded. It's the waves that hurt you. So and I'm not sure. I mean, anything that goes in that hard must come out. Come sluice out of the reef somehow, and I'm sure that the riptides are probably prodigious there, I would guess, but I've never heard of them.
So do people worry about concussion? Do people wear helmets or anything?
Sometimes, they used to. Helmets kind of come and go. Surf leashes come and go because the leash keeps the board from getting away from you, and you can get onto your board, and the board is kind of safety. But a leash can also get caught on the rocks. They can and do get caught on the rocks, and they're really strong, and they can drown you. You can get that leash around a rock, and you can't come up. So yeah, those come out, and one of the things they do now is they have inflatable life vests that a lot of the surfers wear. In case they fall off their board and they're just getting pounded, they can pull it just like on an airplane and fill up, float,
I've always
get back
hoped
to the
that when they
surface.
do that thing on the airplane, that I'll never actually have to test it to see
No
if the
kidding.
light will come on when I'm in the water or whatever and all this. Yuck. They do that all the time when you're just flying to New York, and unless you're actually over Lake Michigan, the odds are you're never going to need to use it. But
Yeah,
still.
yeah.
So it's been a long time since you were a teenage boy, but you've got two young men in this. Were you able to throw yourself back into what it was like when you were a young guy?
Yeah, sure. That's another one of the joys of being a writer is inhabiting characters who are not you. Luckily in this case, she's talking about Casey and Brock, Jen's twin surfer boys. They're now 24, and it was not hard to enter them because I have boys that age. I have a son who's 32 and another son who's 25. So they were right in that area, and I was able to use, some of them in the creation of these things. It's fun to go back. It's really fun to go back. I realized when I was realized when I was writing, probably by the time I hit 50, I was thinking, from now on, I'm only going to write about characters who are younger than me because they're more interesting and they have more fun, And so I kept writing heroes who were in their 30s and 40s, and I got these young men who are in their low 20s and stuff. And I do adore the young and wonderful, and these guys especially are perfect for this book because surfers, big wave surfers especially, even regular surfers, passionate surfers are an interesting breed. They're the reason why they ride waves is, speaking of big wave surfers now, these guys, there's a little money in it but not much. So it's not for these big contests, not for the money, but a little bit for recognition. But it's not that. It's for the incredible power that they feel, the thrill that they get, the high that they get from doing something and getting away with something that's really, really difficult to do and really, really dangerous. And the adrenaline rush that they get is powerful, and that's what brings them back over and over again to that wave. And I understand that, not in terms of waves maybe, but I get when you do something that gives you back wonderful feelings that you want to go out and do it again, and the cost risk factor, depending on your pastime, can be really high, and you'll still accept it. I look at like mountain climbers, these guys who do Everest, and the free climbers, El Capitan and stuff, and surfers, big wave surfers, and I respect them immensely, and I'm always kind of scratching my head and wondering, at what point you just have to say that these people are crazy, and yet they're not. You talk to them. I met them. I talked to them. They've written books, and they're for the most part, they're really sober people. They're really involved in what they do, and they're very aware of the dangers, and this book has a lot of that in it. They're very aware of preparation, training, the things that Jen does to get back into shape to ride these big waves are all of them do it, So anyway, I respect that sort of crazy brinksmanship, and I wish that sometimes I wish that I had it, but I don't.
It seems to me, though, that there's an escalation factor sometimes that comes in. When you were talking about dropping from helicopter, I was thinking about that young woman who, I don't remember if it was in Chile or whatever, but, her idea of skiing was to have somebody drop her. And she died from it. There was an avalanche that resulted. So there's a big difference between regular skiing and then
Yeah,
that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I wonder if the addiction to adrenaline is such that you have to up it, sort of like, increasing your heroin load or something.
I wonder. Yeah, I wouldn't know. I don't have that kind of personality.
Me either.
Yeah, yeah.
But you can certainly see it. Now, we talked about your writing, young men and all, but you're very good about writing women. California Girl is an example. And really, the heart of this book is Jen.
Yeah, she is. She's the heroine.
So
Or
is
the
your
protagonist,
is your
anyway.
lovely wife an inspiration here, or how is it that you do so well? I've met her; she really is lovely.
Yeah.
How is it that you so easily enter into women
I don't know.
as characters?
Good mom, sister, my wife. All the women I've known. The girlfriends, friends, relatives. My cousins. It's easy. It's easy. The thing that I have to be careful with when I write women is I have to be more attuned to how that character might react given her femaleness, as opposed to how I might react if I was writing a male character, say maleness, and so I'm more careful with that because like the first time I ever wrote a female character in depth was Mercy Rayborn. I wrote a whole series of books based on her. Three books? Yeah, 3
It was
books.
3, right?
Three books. Yeah, and she's the protagonist of all 3. And when I first set out to write that series, or that first book of hers, I purposefully wanted to write about a woman protagonist, a cop, because I thought it would be difficult, and it was. And it took me a long time to get my bearings on Mercy and make her believable and credible, and credible as a cop, and credible as a woman, and credible as a 27-year-old, whatever she is. And so women are hard to write. You have to be more careful, and you have to be more attentive to their character. I think that whereas I might understand instinctively, what a guy might do, I don't really necessarily instinctively understand what a woman might do. So you got to be careful, and you got to be alert to it and stuff. I've had a series of female editors, last few, and they're always, and Rita too, when she reads my manuscripts, they're always, they always say, well, I mean, she's great character and everything, but she wouldn't do that, and they know, and they're right. And I go, really, I had not thought of that, but based on how I know you and watching you raise your children and how you deal with me, yeah, you're right. She wouldn't do that. So I get help.
It's nice to have that kind of extra editing.
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't know why my voice is so funny. One of the things that I remember that was an interesting difficulty for you with Mercy is you didn't really want to write a series. Yeah. That was your first series. You and I had several discussions about writing standalones versus series. And I was impressed that you actually made it a trilogy, because I thought you kind of wanted to drop off it after 2.
Yeah, I did. I've been series phobic my whole life as a writer. I just never really wanted to. I wrote a lot of books before I wrote a series, but I have moved with the breeze, and I've written not only just a trilogy, but I wrote a 6-book series, Charlie Hood, and I wrote a 4-book series, Roland Ford, and since then I've written 3, soon to be 4 standalones. So I'm kind of back to my old tricks. But so we go around about this all the time. Barbara knows it's smart business to write the series, and she knows that the publishers want that, and she knows the pressures that they put on you to give the same but different, like you just said. They want the series character, and I just never have really felt comfortable doing that. I just don't see how you can do it, and so I don't know if I'll even ever try that again, but I might. I feel much more free without series character.
Are you really done with Roland? I thought he was somebody you might go back to.
Roland? I've had enough of Roland. I'd go back to Charlie Hood.
Would you?
Yeah, I mean, if a publisher came to me and said, write another Charlie Hood, I know exactly where it would start, because I left that 6th book hoping that I would write a 7th, and but I didn't. But I know what I would do if they came to me and said Roland Ford. If they really wanted another Roland Ford book, I guess. But
But it doesn't let you up.
I thought I took him. I thought I took him far enough. I thought
Yeah.
PI stories 4 in a row, enough. And this gentleman here gave me a nice compliment when I walked in the store. He was here, and he said, "Yeah, I got to tell you, I love your books and stuff, but that 1,000 Steps just blew my mind." And the reason I was allowed, the reason why the fates allowed me to write 1,000 Steps was because I'd said goodbye to Roland, and I'd really said goodbye to him, and so I was free. And I needed a book to write, and I didn't know what I was going to write, and it was COVID, and we were all locked down in the early March of COVID, not 2020, and I didn't have a book, and I was supposed to have an outline out, and I couldn't think of anything, and for some reason I kept daydreaming about my teenage days in Laguna Beach. 1968, I was 14. We would body surf, and we'd go to the Taco Bell and watch the drug dealers operate, and the waves were beautiful, and everybody was smoking pot. The whole city smelled like marijuana. This was 1968. I mean, anybody over 30 still had a flat top. And there's all these hippies and stuff walking around, and I was there with my buddies, my little hoodlum friends, and I just couldn't stop thinking about the sights and the sounds and the people that I met there, the stores, the whole scene, the art scene. Larry, yeah, I love that stuff. See, and that was 68, and I had to say goodbye to Roland Ford to meet that story, and I had to say goodbye to Mercy Rayborn to write Silent Joe.
Yep, you did. And you've also changed publishers several times too.
I do.
But you seem to you're back actually with where you started at the moment.
Yeah.
Because I think it was your first 3 books you published with Forge.
It was
wasn't
4, but yeah, close.
Was it 4 books?
It was St. Martin's, but same. They're all part.
Well,
of
it's all
Macmillan.
Macmillan. Yeah,
Right.
it is. And then you've been with Hyperion and Putnam or Dutton and other. So, it's great. I mean, it's hard to have a really long career today.
Is it?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because I think it's hard to do the same but different, and so there's a lot of curiosity about just trying something new.
Are young writers that you see coming through the store here, young published writers, are they well taken care of and optimistic and happy with their situations, or do they always feel like they're about to be canned?
It varies. It's a tough business right now. It's much more commercial than it was when you and I started. It's much more consolidated. COVID thrust everybody into an online world, which is very different than it was when basically, it was an event to come down here and meet authors, and now it's like, well, just I can watch it at home. So that part is different.
Yeah.
And because there's so much money involved, publishers are less inclined to give a range of new authors, I think, an opportunity. But the good side of it is that there are a lot of small publishers that are, as a consequence, springing up. But the bad news is that they can't pay enough for new authors. So basically, it's like you have to keep your day job, if you want to break in. But and some of it is celebrity driven. There's a huge, a celebrity memoir thing, would you say, Patrick? That's a huge thing at the moment. Ghostwriting. I mean, I know we did some work with a smaller publisher, and their entire publishing plan is celebrity memoirs. I mean, they have a professional ghostwriter. Romantasy is taken off, and so there's a whole new wave of people driven by social media to read those kinds of stories. And genres tend to go up and down, and crime, I think right now is in a down move, but eventually there'll be so much romantasy, everybody will be bored.
What do you call it, Barbara? Romantasy?
It's called romantasy, which basically means it's romance with dragons and hot sex, but not with dragons. That's my description, which is really true. And I say that having read one. But now there is what's called cottagecore, a brand new word for me. We did an event Friday night with 2 young women. And basically, they're sort of like writing cozy mystery, but it's fantasy. So instead of having somebody who operates a gourmet chocolate shop in a town of 11 on Lake Michigan, you have somebody who's creating, you know, mystical island that they go to after a coup in the capital or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a blend. It's kind of a genre mashup. It appeals a lot to younger readers,
Mm-hmm.
people who've played video games, people who've watched a lot
Mm-hmm.
of, you know, science fiction and so forth. But my experience is that about every 20 years, there's what I think of as a genre role. If I'd gone back to finish a PhD at Stanford, that was what I was going to write
Yeah.
about. We had discussions about it.
Hmm.
And eventually I decided I really couldn't commute to California and run the store.
Yeah.
But that was a subject that interested me because it's almost like a whole generation of readers
Yeah.
that, you know, people get tired and they move on. And then it's like all of a sudden there's a new generation of readers and something old is
Mhm.
brand new again.
Mm-hmm.
So we really saw a lot of that during COVID and are still seeing it with people reading classics, aren't we, Patrick? That's one of our biggest turning sections. And
Classics.
people who never would have read like War and Peace or The Old Man and the Sea or, you know, whatever, we are selling a serious number of classics all the time.
For young people buying them?
I don't know because I'm not here that much. Patrick, you could speak to that.
That's really cool. I'm glad to hear that. My
And-
my younger boy who's 25. He does that. He reads classics and yeah, he reads Jorge Luis Borges.
Right, but there's a mystery classic thing as well. I mean, there's, you know, Agatha Christie never slows down, but there's a wealth of the British Library crime classics, for example, the whole Golden Age thing.
Yeah.
There's American crime classics, and there's the Library of Congress crime classics, and so I think that younger readers who learn kind of the basics, the touchstones of the genre can appreciate. If you say to somebody that's a locked room mystery, if they haven't read any locked room mysteries, they're going to have no idea what that
Yeah.
actually means.
Yeah, they need that background.
Right. And
Mhm.
so again, part of this is educating people in kind of like the pillars, the literary,
Mhm.
pillars. And then we could go all the way back. I mean, how many Victorian novels can we not really call crime fiction in a broad sense?
Mhm.
I mean, Trollope and the Eustace Diamonds, the Russians,
Mhm. Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
Dickens. I mean, Oliver Twist, that's a great crime novel if you really,
Mhm.
well, it is, So it used to be that people didn't put labels on fiction, and now it's because of having to put labels to tag things for algorithms. That's why all these genre labels are such a big thing right now.
Mhm.
In order for Amazon and whatever they have BISAC codes, they're called, and they tag books with them. And then when it says it's recommending something to you, basically it's just picking up BISAC codes that publishers have put on to say, okay, if you read this, then you
They
went.
need those
I mean,
labels.
Patrick and I can do that without any codes, right, Patrick? We know if you come in here and say, want to read Dennis Lehane and I've read everything, we can recommend. We don't need any help to recommend other authors, but that's not how it works if you're shopping online.
Yep.
So I think in a way it's compartmentalized a lot of things, and that it's also contributed to these kind of waves in particular genres.
Yeah.
So it's
Do you ever
hard.
feel like publishing is suffering a kind of like the streaming services are suffering in the sense that they have too much?
Oh,
Do you ever feel like
today,
there's too
are you
many
ready for
books?
this? Today, I got my weekly notice from Edelweiss, which is a platform that publishers use to put their catalogs and all kinds of stuff on. This week, today, 2,240 new books released. 240,
By
and 487 of them were in adult crime. I can't keep up with that.
Is this American?
Yeah,
U.S.
no, it
or
is, yeah.
English language or what?
It's
Worldwide?
it's from American publishers.
American publishers.
Yeah,
Wow.
right.
That's a lot.
So it's getting increasingly crazy. And so, we have to decide what can we refine down out of what looks like on average 7,000 new books a month. So, what is it that we talk about? We talk about event books. That's a good reason to come here. We talk about, books that we manage to read, and those are like staff picks or
Mm-hmm.
paperback picks. I read about 200 books a month, and that's the best I can do. Well, it is the best I can do. I don't read them all the way through
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. If they're not really, engaging me, I read enough of them to know that, or they're really engaging me,
Yeah.
and move
Yeah.
aside. Um, I don't know how readers can really find their way easily to. So they look at bestseller lists, which
Yeah.
don't really mean
Yeah.
anything.
And the book reviews aren't much help anymore because they're all gone. You know, remember how great
Or they,
they
I
used to
think the
be?
New York Times book review is largely useless at this point. They are so into agenda
Yeah,
that
they are.
you don't really want to read most of the stuff they
Yeah.
recommend.
It's not enough. You need 10 major newspaper reviews like we used to have
Well,
or
it's
20.
just really a different way of doing things, and a huge responsibility has fallen on the author to do the marketing, which is why I sent you those links myself, because
Mm-hmm.
your publisher is not putting those out there for your
Mm-hmm.
fans. You are putting them out there, and
Mm-hmm.
so we do. So we have a 20 some thousand person mailing list, and I write to you religiously, right?
Yep.
So but I can only cover so much, and I'm sure that I miss things that any of you might really want to read. But on the other hand, if you just bought what I tell you about every month, you wouldn't get through that either, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I think is fun is we have some new staff members, and we have changed our staff pick shelves, and I'm hoping that people come in and they look at what are on our staff pick shelves, and they kind of identify with the staff member whose books,
Mm-hmm.
whose picks are sort of like what you want to read. And then, you can talk to that person or kind of
That
rely
must happen.
on
That
that.
must
I
happen a
think
lot.
so.
Yeah.
I think so. We all have different reading patterns,
Mm-hmm.
and we're very diverse. I mean, in what the whole staff
Yeah.
reads, it's very different.
Yeah.
So we're kind of upping our game in terms of staff picks here
Good.
in the store.
Good.
So we'll see.
People need that.
They do.
Readers.
So, how about
appreciate that.
questions from you guys? We can't really say much more about the book without spoilers.
So, what, 26 books?
29.
29. You must be a seriously disciplined guy. What kind of regimen do you have?
Oh, Monday through Friday, up early, write early, write until, used to be around 5, say 5. And that includes research and, stuff you got to do. But basically just butt in the chair, writing. And I have a goal of 5 pages a day, and which is a lot. That's 25 pages in a week. That's 100 pages in a month. That's a 600-page manuscript in 6 months. And I've never gotten 5 pages a day for any sustained period, but I sometimes I do, and I just kind of stay on it. The hardest part for me about writing and discipline is that it takes me a longer and longer amount of time now to get to the point where I'm able to write the first sentence of the book. I have to spend a lot of time thinking about things and outlining some, daydreaming, clip files, reading, movies, whatever it is that kind of stirs your thoughts, and I'll create a story just kind of very slowly, and then I'll people it with characters who will carry this. Like, here's the stage. Who do you need? Do we need a queen and a king, or do we need, how do you populate the book, the story? And it takes me now about 3 months to do that. So 3 months of pondering, to figuring out this story was really tough. And 6 to 9 months of writing, and that will result in a 550-page first draft. So it's a year. Call it a year. Call it a year. And as you know, publishers like a book a year. For most of my publishing life, my publishers have insisted on a book a year, and they not only want a book a year, they want it the same month of every year. Okay, you're going to be spring list. You're going to be April is going to be your month, And we like to. They always pick a Tuesday. They always want to publish your book on a Tuesday.
I can tell you why, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, they
It's
publish
a
your book on
fairly
a
modern
Tuesday.
thing.
Yeah, because the way the bestseller list, New York Times bestseller list, is compounded. It takes a book's back to that point Tuesday, which can qualify your book as a New York Times bestseller the following Wednesday. I think it is something like that. You'd know the details more, but anyway, that's how specific publishers can be. You know, these guys I'm with now, Forge, they're looser. They're looser. They publish it. You know, it'd be every year maybe they published a book of mine, but it'll be sometimes it'll be January and sometimes it'll be August, and I kind of like that. You know, there's a little more flex in them. And the next time I go to negotiate a contract, I don't know when that'll be. This is first book of a 2-book deal, and I'm working on another book now that I'm deep into. When that's done, I'm free. I'm contract free, and at that time I might just think about breaking the book a year rule. I might just say, not going to do it. You know, I'll do you a book every 2 years. I don't know. We'll see how that flies.
Right. Anybody else? Patrick.
Can you talk a little bit about the kind of evangelist kind of church angle in this book and what some of your research was?
Yeah. Evangelist church angle. Brock, one of the boys, the big wave surfers, has started his own church. He's an evangelical minister, and his church is called the Breath of Life, and it's a church in a mission. It's a church that goes out, and he has this group of friends in the church, and they travel the country to trouble spots such as fires, earthquakes, natural disasters of any kind. They go to, in the book, they go to downtown San Diego, and they minister to homeless people and drug addicts on the street with that drug, that Nalgene or something that stops overdoses. And he doesn't like God, so he invented a new God. He reads from he gives these long sermons. He goes on forever in his sermons. He's got this old crummy building out in the Anza, out in the desert in California, and he's got this kind of ragamuffin congregation and his buddies, you know, who try to do good acts and help the poor, and he calls on Christian precepts and Buddhist precepts and Jewish beliefs and all sorts of things, but they don't worship God, they don't mention God, and God's not really part of their thing, you know. That it's the breath of life is their God. And the reason he named it the breath of life is because he himself was pinned on the rocks at Nazaré, and he almost drowned, and he did drown, and his wife dragged him up out of the water though, and she gave him mouth to mouth and brought him back. And so her breath of life is his breath of life, and that's the name of his ministry. And so that's all I'll tell you. Brock is a really interesting character. He's violence prone. He's angry. He's a weird guy, and he's a great surfer. And my very first book, you mentioned evangelicals. I've written about preachers, evangelical mainly, a lot. Laguna Heat, the detective's father, is a minister. He's an evangelical minister, and I've written about him several times. And in the book that I'm working on right now, I have another one. I have an actual priest, a Catholic priest. I just think they're so interesting, you know, men of God, women of God. I mean,
Number of
how wild,
small evangelical operations in Southern California, if I remember right.
Say again?
There are a fair number of small evangelical communities, and
Oh yeah.
going all the way back to, who was that woman that was the big spiritualist in the 1920s? Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Emmy Semple McPherson
That's right.
was a big thing.
It's
So,
big in California. It's
yeah.
big in other places too, but California does breed the weird sort of, you know, cultists. So we're great at it.
1,000 Steps, you had the great kind of guru
Oh yeah.
enlightenment center and that whole movement,
Yes.
which is, I was going to ask you, when you started out, who were some of your main kind of California influences? Was Ross McDonald a big hero of yours, or Chandler?
Yeah.
Did you really read those guys?
I did. Yeah, I loved Chandler, and I loved you know, John McDonald. Not so much California, but I did like him. There was
there was a person who wrote the same book but different. Like
Say what?
John D. MacDonald was a ace at writing the same book but different.
Yeah.
He was really good at it.
He had a formula, but it was a great formula. Yeah, he was a great writer. Yeah, yeah. I think one of the California a lot. Yeah, I've read a lot of California books before I started publishing and stuff. And just because I lived there, and I think the one that really kind of kicked me into gear as wanting to write a crime story set in California was a 70. I'm just guessing 74 novel called by John Gregory Dunn called True Confessions, and it's the most just low down dark crime novel that I've ever read, and it's all Catholic. It's all tied up in the Catholic Church, huh?
The two brothers, one's the
Yep.
priest, one's the
Yeah, one's a cop.
cop.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in California Girl. I tried to get that same feeling, that inbred feeling of family doing different things. Yeah, I have a priest and a cop and a reporter in my California Girl. So yeah, I love the California writers, and we're lucky. I mean, we got we're lucky. I mean, California's the last 20 years has produced good stuff. I mean, we got Connolly and we got Craze and we got Don Winslow and we got I don't know, help me out. I mean, there's a lot of them, you know, and they're treasures. I think in some ways those 80s and 90s were kind of, you know, a minor golden age of crime writing in Southern California anyway, you know. Yeah.
Anybody else? No? Yes? No? Well, in that case, let's thank TJ for coming to see us again.
Yeah,
It's
thank
always
you.
a pleasure to have you here.
All right.
Right. And thank you, virtual audience, for joining us. And if you guys would like to visit with him and get your book signed, I will get out of the way and he can stay here at this table.